Hello, let's take a look at making a component using the CS1 game engine. And to give you a little context right here, I had a student that had asked about making a teleporter component that would require some certain statistics be in place. The player would have done certain things to enable the teleporter to work. So I thought this was a good context to make a video about making such a component and then wrapping that component in a primitive that we can use then very conveniently, even in the HTML if we want to. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'm over here in the IDE, and I am in, you could use lesson 4, any of the lessons that have the game controller. So I'm in lesson 4. And basically this file that's being edited is a file that's found in the project in the source code, in the core components, my components JS file. That's what this is called. I'm just going to make this bigger so you can see what's going on here. So essentially what we have here is we have this file that gets compiled, gets built into the client application. And we're going to be adding a component that we're going to call teleporter. I have it partly written out a little bit just to start it off. And then we're going to be making a primitive that's going to wrap that particular teleporter component. And we're going to also have position included as well as part of the primitive. So what I'm going to do is going to make this a little larger for you to see it more easily. And we'll just start with the register component call. So let's just talk about this for a second. The A-frame register component function is the top level A-frame API function that takes two parameters. It takes the name of the component that you're registering, which is a string, and then separated by a comma, then it has an object. And that object is representing the details about the component that you're going to be defining. So you can define a schema, which will be basically a set of custom data attributes that you can pass into the component to customize it. And then we can have other things like an initializing function called init and a few other parts that we're going to build in. Once we make this teleporter component, we can then wrap it in a primitive that we can use even in HTML if we wanted to. It's basically going to be defining a custom element in HTML as well. Not that we necessarily have to use HTML to declare it. It just provides a convenient way of doing that if we so desire. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we have. We want to make a teleporter, and we want to be able to specify a target for the teleporter, where we want the teleporter to go to. We want to be able to specify a stat that's required for the teleporter to work. We're going to say that the point style is required, and you have to have a minimum value of 0. So in other words, there's no really minimum by default, because everybody's going to have at least 0 points. And then the cost for that particular use of the teleporter. Maybe you're going to have a cost that you can subtract away from the value. So we're just going to put that as 0. And then we're going to have a model that's going to represent our teleporter. So we're going to give some kind of visual model, and it's just going to be default to this GLB model right here, just a really basic model. And I'll show you it. Here it is right there. There's the GLB model. That's what this link is to. So you can specify another model if you follow this tutorial. So over here in the init function, we are going to take some of the information that we have up here in the schema, and we're going to put it to use. So let's take a look. First of all, it's going to be premature to be referencing the target at this point, and the stat, and the min value. and the cost, but we want to actually use the model up front. We want to actually make our model, and we're going to, yeah, so we're just going to go ahead and make the model at first. So let's go ahead and make the model. So we're going to go ahead and say this, and let's actually store it within the object, the component object, and say this dot model equals, and let's make a new GLTF model. So document, create element, and we're going to make an AGLTF model, which is in itself is actually a primitive. We could actually put in the source, we could actually put that as a one-liner. Maybe I'll just write it on a separate line so it's easier to read. Maybe I can just put this as an empty string at first so you can read it more easily. Then I'll say this dot model dot src equals, I can do it that way, or set attribute src. So I'll probably stick with set attribute because we use that quite often rather than doing dot src. And then over here we will put in the actual value. I could have put it over on the other line, but it just would have been more. It would have been harder to read. So over here we're going to go ahead and pass in the value of this dot data dot model, and that's going to be the source of the model. And then we're going to have to add the model as a child of the, basically the entity that's going to end up being the primitive. We're just going to say this dot L, referring to this, the element, the actual entity that is going to be representing this. Down the road, it's going to be our teleporter down here, our teleporter primitive. But we're going to say this dot L append child, and we're going to say this dot model. So with that in place, now what we've done is, just to review what we've done here, is upon initializing this, we're going to create a GLTF model. We're going to set the source to be this GLB file up here, and then we're going to add that model to our teleporter entity. All right, so with that being done, now we can, there's not really too much to this. Once we have that done, we can set the, yeah, we don't even have to worry about the position. We can set that when we declare it. So we can pretty much get away with just that. Let's go down below this and put a comma, and we're going to add a tick function. Well, not talk, tick. We're going to add a tick function, and the tick function can give you the total time as well as the time since the last tick. Not that we're going to need those necessarily, but we're just going to reinforce that understanding about the tick function. It gives you two parameters. It'll pass in the time, total time, and the time since the last tick. But what are we going to do here in the tick? We're going to check to see, first of all, if the player is within a certain distance. So we're going to say over here, we're going to say if, then we'll just do it this way, cs1.myPlayer, and we'll just go over here, dot object, we'll actually go to the object 3D dot position, which is a position vector, is a vector 3 in A frame. So we're going to say if the object 3D position for my player, now we actually have this function that's available, distance 2. And if we say this distance 2, and we can just say this dot L dot object 3D dot position, and then we can say, so that will give us the actual value, and if that is less than, let's just say, I don't know, I want to just say 1 for right now. But if that's less than 1.0, then we're going to do something inside of these curly braces. Now I could make that smaller so it doesn't overrun. Hopefully it's still big enough where you can see it. So we're saying if the CS1 my player object 3D position the distance to this teleporter position is less than 1. So if the player is within 1 of this teleporter, we want to check a couple other things. We can actually add an and then extend the requirements here. So I'll just do that. We'll go and. We'll go and I could actually put the second requirement on another line. So we want to say, so CS1, we want to check the stats to make sure that the stats requirement is met. So I'm going to say CS1.stats, and then we want to reference, right? We want to reference the this.data.stat, and we want to say that value is greater than or equal to this.data.min value. Is that what I called it? Min value, I believe so. Let me go check. Yep, called it min value and stat. All right. And we're just going to keep point star right in there. If that's the case, so let's talk about what this is saying so far. So the first thing is inside of this tick function, which runs every basically about 60 times a second. So whenever this runs, we're going to be checking to see if the player is within 1 of the teleporter. We're going to check the stats to see if the required stat is greater than the minimum value that we require. And if both of those conditions, well, if that, I should say that compound Boolean expression is true, then what we want to do is we want to go ahead and perform the teleportation. So we want to use that target value. So we want to say CS1, and we don't have any sound effects or anything. I'm going to leave that as something else. So you can add sound effects and other things. I'm just going to keep this very basic. It already has enough to it that you can get the basic idea here. So I'm going to say cs1.myPlayer. And I'm going to go over here. I'm going to say set attribute, just because I used, rather than using the object 3D, since I'm using the object 3D, object 3D is better to set position typically, but I'm just going to use the set attribute position because of the way that I defined, and it's just a little more convenient, I think, to define the target as a string of X, Y, and Z position rather than like a vector expression. I guess I could use a vector. I'm just going to use this. I'm just going to use it as a string right now. You could go change it as a vector, but for right now, I'm just going to do that as a string. Let's say that string, excuse me, is going to be this dot data dot target. So I'm going to set the position to this dot data target. And we want to take away the cost too. So we want to say right over here, the stats. So we want to go over here. If that's the case, then we want to go over here. And we're not going to do error handling with this too, so it might fail in a non-elegant manner. So I'm going to skip kind of checking for the right types of data being passed in and so forth. I'm just going to get right to the business here of taking the stats. That particular stat is required. I'm going to say change by, and then we'll say this dot data dot cost. So we're going to change that stat by the cost. And the cost should be, I should actually say the negative of the cost. I'm going to say that the cost is a number. So I'm going to say the opposite of the cost. So I'll say that to put in the cost is like whatever. If it was 10 points, then that would be negative 10 points. So that should be alrighty. Now down here, I've already started to spell out the Primitive is a teleporter that requires teleporter and position, wraps them. I don't think that I need to actually specify position as a default component because I think that's automatically going to be one of the defaults anyway. But just want to be explicit about that, I guess. The mappings is going to map target, stat, min value, cost, and model. So really the benefit we get of creating the primitive here is that we can define this in HTML as a custom element. Beyond that, we're not getting too much out of this. All right, so we're just going to define a basic primitive that wraps the teleporter component. We're going to say that we want to specify a position as well, so we know where to put the actual teleporter. All right, so I think this is okay. So I'm going to click Save and Build. Actually, let's go ahead and just add one of these components. Let's just go ahead and add it up here in the game start. So I guess I'll just go over here, const teleporter, I guess teleporter 1 equals, and I will say document dot create element. Well, actually on game start, let me avoid. I could do that on game start. That's okay. I'll just do it on game start. Create element, and then we'll say a teleporter, because at that point, and then let's just pass in an empty string right now, and then we'll define the details down here below. Then we'll say, we could actually put all the details, the data inside of this string, but it just will look nicer on the screen for you if I just type it out this way. So teleporter 1.set attribute. The only thing I'm really concerned with here is maybe setting the position. I can set the position. Yeah, let me just set the position. I'll just keep everything else default. And I'll just, matter of fact, let me just, I'll just take the object. So I don't even need, I don't even have to put position on the other one, so I'll probably take it off. I'll just say object 3d.position, and I'll do it set, and I will say that's going to be 0, 0, 2, or -2, I should say, -2. And then let's just add it. cs1.scene, whoops, .append child, and we'll add that teleporter 1. Oh, teleporter 1. There we go. All right, so that should be pretty much it. Let's check down here. I don't think, since I've done that, I don't think I even need to have positions specified down here. I think that's overkill. So why don't I just take that out? If I do need it, I will go back and fix it, and you will see the you'll see the benefit of me realizing that. All right, so let's go ahead and see how if this works, or if we have to change something. So let's go ahead and launch this. And let's go ahead and log in. Looks like we got the teleporter right there.
This world can be anything you dream it to be.
Okay, so I'm going to take that sound off. So it looks like we got our teleporter in front of us. That's what we were looking for. Let's see if it actually works. I put it 2 in front of me, so it's not going to trigger it at the very beginning. So if I go over here, oh, look at that. Now I've passed the teleporter, so it looked like it worked. Well, let's go and see if we can do it again. Oh, that was so fun. And it didn't take long to make the... So if I go over here, I should actually go on the other side of... Well, let me actually move this down a little bit. Let me just move this down over here. And I'll go back to the teleporter. And let's do it. Boom. Yay. I traversed that whole distance. I teleported. I met the minimum requirements for the stats. And I'm not going to test all the edge cases for this. I am sure that people out there in the community will come out and say, hey, you made an error in this edge case, but go ahead and let me know if that's the case. But look, it works. Boom. At least for those defaults and so forth. And let's just go back in and celebrate. Let's go review for a second, and then we'll finish this video and say, hey, that was a wrap. So basically, this is just part of the mycomponents.js file that's found inside of the components folder, which is found inside of the core folder, excuse me, that's found inside of the source folder. So this is in the project. If you go to the source folder, into the core folder, components, and then mycomponents.js, that's what this file is. It's basically the same file that would show up if you were in the IDE like I am, like under lesson 4 or lesson 1 for that matter. It doesn't really matter. Any of these lessons that has like this game controller as the emoji. And what I've done is I've created a really basic teleporter component that takes some customizing information in, a target, a stat that's required for it to work, a cost that you can charge against that stat, and then a model by default. And then you can put in your own model if you wanted and everything. And then it defines the model and attaches it to the teleporter. And then down here in the tick function, it just checks to see if my player is within 1 of the teleporter. And if it is, boom. Well, if it is, as well as the stat value being greater than or equal to the minimum value, then it changes the position and it subtracts the cost. That's pretty much it. And then down here, we just wrap it in a teleporter primitive. Now we could have, we can actually create another primitive in HTML. I guess why not? Let's just do that. Let's create a teleporter in HTML, and we'll add a little bit more to this video. Let's go to the HTML section. So lesson 5. So if I go into lesson 5 and go down here, for example, maybe above the player, I'll go right above the player. I'll add a little bit of lines. So over here, I could just add in a teleporter, and I could just close it off with / a teleporter. So this is a way that we can, since we've made a component, or excuse me, since we made a primitive, now we can do this. So I can just set the position equals, and what do I want to set the position for this one to be? I'll make this one -5, -0. I just want it to be on the ground, and I'll make this negative. I'll make it right over -5. What am I going to make this? -2. I'll just make it right over to the left of where the other one is. All right. So with that, then I'm going to save it. So the only thing different about this is I'm adding this in the HTML, whereas the other one I'm adding in the JavaScript. So I should have 2 teleporters now. This one was declared in the HTML with this position, if I spelled it right. And I think I'm good. I can just go, I think I saved it, yep. Should be able to launch the game, and there should be 2 teleporters this time. One of them should already be here at the beginning. So let's go see. Well, let me refresh this so I can make sure I'm logged out. Give me 5 seconds, log me out. Oh, no, I have another window open, that's why, I'm sorry. Didn't realize I left my other window open. There we go. I'll give it a few seconds. And we shall see. Look at that. We got our one teleporter. Now we have the other one that we made in HTML. Let's see if it works. Boom. Yeah, it takes us to that same place. So that both teleporters, very close to each other, take us to the same place. So let's see if they both work. Oh my gosh. Does it work? Oh, yes, it does. Okay. And then we could add like a sound effect or whatever, but we're not going to get too fancy with this. I think that kind of makes the point that we can add it with JavaScript. We added this one with JavaScript. We added this one with HTML. And we went through the whole process of And going back there, we went through the whole process. Let me go back to lesson 4 and go over this again. Went through the whole process of defining the component teleporter, and then we wrap the component in a primitive. Now you can go ahead and pause this video and just copy what you see right there. Take your time, ask questions in the YouTube comment, post them to the CS1 Discord or wherever, and I will be happy to answer them. You have a wonderful, wonderful day.